Yeah, man. So,
Awesome.
hey, man,
I'm
nice to
always
meet you,
happy to hear
brother.
that. You too, man.
All
Yeah,
right.
happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, just I was telling this is a little different than what we normally do on the VietAssist podcast because we
Hmm.
have our main business is connecting Vietnam remote workers with U.S. and then European because I grew up in the States, but based in Denmark because I told you my wife is she's actually half and half, right? I met her in
Hmm.
Vietnam in 2012.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
what do you call it? Alex might not know this, but at the time I was dating a bunch of different girls. Alex is my brother-in-law, by the way. He's married. He's married to my wife's youngest sister, so that's why he's kind of included in all
Wow.
this.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
It's all in the family. Nice.
So he's got
Yeah.
a
Love
son
it.
who's a quarter Vietnamese, so he's very vested in the culture and the history of Vietnam. Yeah.
Sweet. Love it.
But you are are you from Cali? Is that where you originally from?
Yeah, I am. I'm from Los Angeles, the
All right.
Valley specifically, San Fernando
Okay.
Valley.
All right. Born in the
Where are you
States
from?
or?
Yeah, born in the States. I was born in the States,
All
born in
right,
LA.
man. Fucking your Vietnamese is really good for somebody who was born. Well, I was born in Saigon and I came over as a 11th month old. So basically grew up in
Hmm.
the States also like you. But your Vietnamese is like how long have you been back in Vietnam, by the way?
I've been back and forth for quite a bit. My longest stint, 2011 to 2015.
Okay.
I stayed for about 4 years. I studied here for university for one
Ah,
semester. I did one
okay.
semester.
All right.
And I did take intensive Vietnamese classes in Hanoi.
Okay.
And this current trip, I've been back for almost a year and a half now. Yeah.
All
So
right.
in total, maybe like 6 years.
Yeah, man. I was just thinking. I was showing my brother your clip, and I was just thinking, man, this guy's Vietnamese is pretty on par for somebody who I think grew up in the States. So
Yeah, I gotta attribute it to my mom, first of all.
yeah,
She really had just like a really simple rule because she couldn't speak English. So I remember very clearly like sitting across from her, and then she just like told me, "You're gonna speak Vietnamese because I don't speak English. I want to talk to you."
yeah.
I. So that's it. It was as simple as that. And I think also because I'm older millennial. I was born 85. I'm turning 40 in like a couple months.
All right.
Back then, our community over in the States, when this generation, like older millennial, we didn't have a lot of Vietnamese English speaking cousins yet
Yeah,
during
yeah.
that time. And then me in particular, my older sister and older brother were born in Vietnam, and
Oh
they
wow.
didn't come
Okay.
over until I was like 5 or 6. We couldn't sponsor them over until many years later. So when they came over, they came with my cousins, and
Yeah.
there was all these kids, all these teenagers from Vietnam, and they didn't speak any English.
Right.
And I was just like this little kid, like American born, mostly playing by myself. My little sister was a baby. And then I just thought they were so cool. Like I wanted to hang out with them like every day, and they're just like,
Right.
oh, this guy's like a little American brat, like get away from us. But like that need to hang out with them was so strong for me, like in all my childhood years, that it
Yeah.
forced me to speak Vietnamese. I had to speak it. So I was around it
Ah,
all the
okay.
time, but I had that need, and I'm always like, listening to them tell stories, and like, my family was like I think like most Vietnamese families living in the States or anywhere overseas during that time, it was just packed. The house was always full of people,
Right.
and sometimes we had like 2 or 3 families living in the house at the same time, like uncles, other cousins.
Hey,
So it
man,
was
I can.
constant. They're so loud, all the time telling stories, cracking jokes. So I just absorbed all of that as a kid.
You're fortunate, by the way. Not everybody has that. Every almost 10 out of 10 Vietnamese people that I meet who grew up in the States, they wish if they had a chance to go back in time, they wish they got more exposure to it, one, or they were just forced more. They wish kind of their parents kind of
Mm.
egg them further to learn the language because it's obviously a lot harder to learn. It's possible, but it's a lot harder to learn when you're older. And what you're saying about having a bunch of families kind of crammed together, I can relate to that. I'm a little slightly older than you. I'm turned 50 this past year, and
Mhm.
I grew up where there was three Vietnamese families in Northern Virginia. All right. And I remember my dad, every time he'd run into them, every so often he'd freak out because he was so excited to see another Vietnamese person. You know, there was no infrastructure. There was no local Vietnamese doctor or a shopping center that you can go to and get, you know, the basic things that you needed, like Nick Mom, you know, and different foods. And it was a time where you had to speak Vietnamese. Unfortunately, my mom, you know, was very adamant about me speaking Vietnamese at home. As soon as I left the house, I spoke English. All right, because all my friends were white or whatever, and but at home I was forced to speak the language, and that served me well because I came back to Vietnam also in 2008, lived there for 12 years. But man, if I didn't come back, a lot of the experiences in Vietnam, and you can relate to this, you miss out on it, right? I mean, people want to talk, they want to share their culture, and you know, a smile and you know, a pleasant face goes so far. You got to be able to understand and reply, and in the talking, in the speaking of the language, then they open up even more. They appreciate, even if Vietnamese sucks. Alice can't relate to having a house full of people because here in Scandinavia, people are freakish about personal space. So when we talk about a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, man, it's not going to make sense to Alex.
And my family in particular. But I would also say, Chris, I mean, apart from that, you were also pretty lucky that you got that chance and you felt that need while you were still a kid, right? Because I mean, a lot of the plasticity of the brain and whatnot, and the ability to learn languages as quickly, though it is still possible, but not as quickly, it's lost when you grow up, right? So you're lucky that you were exposed with that intensity while you still had the ability to pick up a language as swiftly as children can pick up languages.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that a lot because a lot of my work now is language related. And, you know, I went through school, like, you know, learning linguistics, and looking back, you know, it made me reflect like, oh, wow, I had that perfect window that time. And I think Lam can relate because, you know, we had the language as kids, but we didn't go to school in Vietnamese. So I basically sound like a really uneducated person over here when I speak Vietnamese, and it throws people off. They're like, what's wrong with this guy? He speaks fluent Vietnamese, but he can't read very fast. And like, he doesn't know big words, you know, but I have the I guess I could call it like the mechanics of the language, you know, like from an early age. And so I could pick it up very fast, and I could kind of like mimic people here. You know, that's why I have all those characters. Like I just like do an auntie, do an uncle character. And, you know, like I'd say like 90% of the time people think I'm a local here, you know, and they'll ask me like, oh, did you study abroad in America? I was like, no, I was born there. They're like, what? How's that possible? You know? Unless they start talking to me longer, and then they're like, okay, this guy's not from here. Like, I'll just like miss a word that like everybody knows here. I'm like, oh God, what's that word? Like, what's the word for like, I don't know, man, ceiling, or like, you know, exhaust pipe, or some word that I never use like in my daily life in the US. Yeah, and then I get exposed.
Hey man, walk us back prior to coming to Vietnam. What motivated you? What got you to, you know, just basically pack up and head to Vietnam?
Yeah, I think about this pretty frequently too, just because I'm so invested in life here now, and I don't really see myself leaving, to be honest. And I would say like up until I was maybe in my early 20s, I never thought this would ever happen. Like I would have such a connection to Vietnam because I grew up just completely American. I had my cousins and like my siblings, but you know, we had like our own community, and it kind of checked off all the boxes for being Vietnamese. Like we had our pho restaurant, and we had our home cooking, and you know, all the things that were needed to be like, you know, satisfying the Vietnamese identity we had in California. There's tons of Vietnamese people there. But then I think it was really when I studied abroad here. Right. That semester I studied in Hanoi. That wasn't my first time visiting Vietnam. I came with my dad when I was 18. Right after high school, he took me, and I brought 3 of my friends from high school. 2 guys who weren't even Vietnamese. And we just like had fun, man. Like it was loud and it was crazy, and you know, we ate food and we tried to talk to girls and all that, and came back, and I just had like just not the deepest impression. But then university, I studied history and I studied Southeast Asian studies. So it was like I had to do homework, you know, like I was there being told by a professor, like, you need to research this, you need to read these books. And the program that we had in Hanoi was absolutely legendary. Like it's no longer running, but it produced like this group of like Vietnamese Americans. Our program was specifically kids from California, and the director was a famous Vietnam scholar named Gerard Sazges. And actually, Ali Wong, I don't know if you're familiar with Ali Wong. She was
Yeah, sure. The comedian. Yeah.
Yeah. She was in the first group that studied in this program, actually. And me a few years later after her group. But the cool thing about this program was the professor took us around the country. So 2 weeks we spent in the central and 2 weeks in the south. And he took us to sites that you would never go to on a tour. He took us to small towns, villages, very rural communities, and just kind of gave us like a tour that you can never pay for. Basically, this was run by like a professor of Vietnamese studies, and we had assigned reading, and some things would cut so deep, because we came with our own impression of what Vietnam was supposed to be just through our family.
Right.
Some of it was really warped, and then going there and experiencing it like directly from a professor in such a profound way. A lot of us were just in tears, it affected us so much. And that really, I couldn't shake that off when I got back. Other people in the program, of course, we just went back and then took on jobs and just had families in the US. And for them, it was a cool experience. But for me, it was so profound that I was like, I got to find my way back, and a big part of that too was all these people I met on the way. Cause I grew up like a very urban kid in LA and got into a lot of trouble. And I had my very California upbringing, and then going there and just meeting kids living in fishing towns and Vietnamese artists and all these people that I was able to connect to because I had the language, even though it wasn't perfect. I was able to talk to them and be like, hey, what's your life about? And then they reciprocated, they were just as curious. And everybody was on Facebook at the time, so we stayed in touch. And I felt like I crossed this bridge, and I'm like, I want to keep doing that. I want to keep building that and having something to do with Vietnam, moving forward, So I just kept finding my way back. And then I graduated 2008 during the recession, so I couldn't find a job. And I spent 2 years just kind of tutoring kids, and I'm like, man, this is not going anywhere. I might as well go to Vietnam, because a couple people put in my mind this idea of teaching English over there, which a lot of people do. And I was finding any excuse to go. So I'm just like, let me just do it. I'll take a year, see how it goes. And then I ended up staying for 4, and then it continues from there.
You came out to Vietnam in 08?
Yeah, we overlapped. Yeah, I was there.
That's crazy, man.
I was there 2006, 7, and then I lived there 2011 to 2015. Wow. Yeah. So you were there for 12 years, right?
Yeah. I love Vietnam. I still love Vietnam. I think about Vietnam all the time. I tell Alex that, man, had it not been for COVID, because we came when COVID was getting bad in early 2020, my wife said, hey, let's just go back, honey. Let's go back to Denmark. Let's just hang out with family. We'll go out there for a couple of months. And, when shit gets better, we'll head back to Vietnam. You get here. And of course, a week later, airports closed down. Mm-hmm. And I was paying, I was living in District 10, paying my rent in my apartment there for the next 2 years, convinced that I was, we were going back. I didn't want to give up the apartment. After a while, my wife just said, you know what, honey, we might have to have plan B here. So she applied to dental school, got accepted to the University of Copenhagen dental school program. And I'm kind of committed here. She supported me in Vietnam for 8 years. We met in 2012. She came back maybe within 4 or 5 months, pretty quick. And but ever since then, I tell you, man, I even dream about Vietnam. I don't know about you, not so much because you're already there. But I miss the days of just zipping around on my scooter, in District 4 and in these different places in the afternoon, of course, when things got cooler. But man, I mean, I once in Vietnam, once getting a sense of that energy, especially because Vietnam in 2008, I remember my reason for going back was because I was I had a commercial real estate finance company that I built, and we went belly up in 2 weeks when the financial meltdown hit the world. I was depressed. Yeah. Wanted to go back, and I said, shit, man, I'm going to go back now. No time better to reconnect with my roots. And I went back. What originally was planned to be a 2-month stay ended up being a 12-month stay. And it would have been an ongoing thing had not for COVID. So our plan is eventually. I told her, hey, honey, when you finish your degree, get your ass ready. You know, we're gonna pack up. We're gonna get our kids back. I want them to experience what you've experienced in Vietnam, which is to go out at these different parts of the country, reconnect with your roots, feel Vietnamese in your body. It's one thing to go back and know that this is part of my dad's culture. You know, it's another thing to actually be able to talk to people, to sense the warmth of the people, and to have a deeper understanding and appreciation of, you know, the grittiness, the toughness of the Vietnamese people. Now, Alex knows, man. I mean, we, you know, 1,000 years fighting off the Chinese, another 100 years, fighting off the French. We're some tough mofos, man. And that thing has made me extremely proud. And Alex is many of our listeners don't know. Alex is the second youngest frogman in Denmark. The frogman is the equivalent of the Navy SEALs, right? So he's very, very tough. Looks like a little schoolboy, but behind that, probably demeanor.
I'm a little schoolboy. This might be tired.
Even more intense.
I get energized when I meet dudes like you who also share this passion for the country, even though you're far removed, man. Even though you grew up in the States, not everybody who grows up in the States in a Vietnamese household has this urge to reconnect with their roots, as you know.
No, absolutely not. Cool. Yeah. I sense that too. I mean, I feel like most of my friends back in the States who are Vietnamese heritage, they like it. They come back. It's cool. They love Vietnam, but I think a part of them feels what I'm doing is pretty crazy. And then in the past, I used to think like, how could you not like it? But then now I've kind of let go of that. I'm like, hey, everybody has their reasons. You guys enjoy having your American style barbecues and family get-togethers, July 4th or whatever it is. And like, that's cool, man. Like, I respect that. Not everybody does what I do. And, ultimately Vietnam isn't for everybody. Like it is kind of its own thing, right when you step out of the airport, it's kind of like, whoa, like, what is this place? And for some people, they love it. And some people like, get me out of here. Even Vietnamese people. And I'm like, that's fine. Even Vietnamese people here in Vietnam, sometimes question, like, they're like, what are you doing here? I'm trying to leave. I'm like, wow, everybody's different. Yeah, everybody's different. Yeah. So
how has the country changed since you come back?
Oh gosh. So the last time I was here, so I go so many times. I visit I try to visit almost every year since I lived here. But of course, COVID, I didn't come. I came 2019, and I don't know if you remember at all the station in Saigon that never got built. The
sure.
mass transit, and they closed down a lot of the big streets. And 2019, that was still closed, and then I came back, just I guess last year was when we touched down again. I took my wife here, she's still here, and everything opened up, right? So they finally cleared out like all of that construction, and I'm just getting lost. I'm driving around, I need a GPS. I thought I knew the city, but I'm like, wow. Oh, what is this street? It's amazing. And then the area along the river, where the walking street ends.
Sure.
Beautiful green spaces now. I mean, not that you would ever want to hang out there for too long because it's so hot, but it's gorgeous. And then the new bridge, Basan Bridge, and they're building like what looks like a beautiful skyline now when you cross that bridge. It's like a suspension bridge, and you look over and there's this beautiful riverside skyline. Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. But going into the city, I don't know where this comes from, this like surge of innovation that's happening right now in Saigon, and I think in Vietnam in general, but definitely you feel it here in Saigon, is everything from like food to fashion to nightlife to all these different areas where there's a lot of innovation, a lot of energy. When I was here, and I'm sure you remember back then too, it was not easy to even get a cocktail, like a good drink at a bar, there wasn't that many options. And then when you do get it, you're like, it's all right, And then now, wow, it's incredible. Like me and my wife are always just hitting the town and just trying to find like a new cocktail bar that we haven't been to. And there's so many now, and they're so creative, they're so innovative, amazing, using local ingredients, story behind the drink. I was like, oh my gosh, Like me and my wife had traveled to all these countries before getting here last year. And there were some that were like top 100 cocktail bars in the world. And then I'm like, oh, these are so much better. It's not even on the map, you know, and like they're doing such creative stuff. Cafes, another example, you know, like back in the States, you know, you go get a coffee and, you know, you get a coffee, you know, or you go to Starbucks, they have their seasonal drinks or whatever. But here in Saigon, every cafe or cafe chain has their signature drinks. And the menu is always changing. I'm like, how many different types of coffee are you going to come up with? There's like so much innovation here. And people have told me like, like maybe something happened during COVID. Everybody was just cooped up. And then they're just like thinking of all these ideas and then just like waiting to get out there to like just try all these things out. Like, I don't know what it is, but you can feel it
Something
here.
is happening economic. I mean, money is pouring into Vietnam. And I think there's an article recently in The Economist that said that Vietnam is probably going to be the fastest growing economy in Asia in during the next decade, right? I mean, there are a couple of competitors, but Vietnam is likely to be the fastest growing, and there are several reasons. But for some reason, money is pouring in, right? Money is going out of Europe, out of the US. Let's see what's going to happen under Trump. But money is going out of the West into Asia, and right now, not a lot of it are going into China, at least not as much as earlier. And then at the same time, Vietnam is becoming much more competitive because more people are speaking English and whatnot. So, I mean, because we've been looking into this a lot, obviously, right? We've been discussing this with a lot of different experts on Vietnamese economy. What's going on here? Because there is a surge in innovation and entrepreneurial activity in Vietnam, and the reason is probably that there's just more money coming into the economy.
Yeah, I would say too. There's something that's almost feels like an anomaly here because I'm in the education industry mostly, right? Teaching language. My entire background is English teaching, and now I'm kind of like dabbling with Vietnamese teaching as well. And Vietnamese people really love English. Yeah, like you said, there's so many people trying to learn English here. And I'm on social media. My most successful brand actually is teaching English. So I have a big presence on TikTok that I'm trying to keep going, teaching English on there, and it's way less goofy than the stuff you see on Instagram. But I'm getting in touch with other English teaching creators here in Vietnam. They're amazing. They're very supportive, and just feeling out the whole industry here. Wow, it's massive. You know, you go to Thailand, huge tourism industry, not as much English as Vietnam. Go South Korea, Japan. I don't know about China. I've never been, but everyone is trying to learn English in Vietnam, and everyone wants their kids to learn it to the point where it's almost toxic, to be honest. I'm watching like people compare their English test scores and like, what, you don't speak English yet? Like, you know, all these things. It's such a priority right now for Vietnamese people. And I think it's just part of one bigger movement, right? Of Vietnamese people, like, we got to catch up to the rest of the world right now. And English is one of the keys to do that. And you feel it everywhere.
You might even end up surpassing, you know, a number of European nations, right? I mean, there are some countries in Europe. I've been traveling a lot within Europe, and there are some countries in Europe where it's still difficult. I mean, Spain and Portugal, for instance, which surprises a lot of people. It can be difficult to find an English, TV series or movie there. If you turn on a television, or Netflix or whatever, the whole thing is bombarded with Spanish or Portuguese movies and series, not English, right? So I mean, they have the same problem, that they are notoriously bad at speaking English, and the same with, at least until recently, with the French, right? So I mean, if Vietnam keeps on this, keeps this development going for much longer, they're gonna surpass half of Europe in terms of English speaking skills.
Oh yeah, I totally see that.
I've said this multiple times to Alex offline, and also in a recent podcast. You walk around the many hams in Saigon, the thousands of hams, any day at 4 or 5 o'clock afternoon, obviously after school, you're gonna see some a house with 15 kids jam packed in there learning English, and this is after school, and they're getting another 2 hours of extra education, because the pressure to learn and to excel, it's almost kind of a given that you got to learn English, especially with the younger generation. It is still the language that pretty much everywhere in the world you can go and survive if you speak that language. Obviously, in Vietnam, there's groups that are proponents of learning Japanese because they want to go work in Japan, and they want to work in maybe somewhere in Russia. But I think still Vietnam is the dominant language of choice. And just this is something that I joke around all the time with my wife. In America, you got a culture where they poke fun at the guy who's smart. You give them the derogatory word nerd. In Vietnam, the nerd, right, is that he gets all the girls, right? He's the stud. He's put on a pedestal, and it's just a completely different attitude about education, and so
that is
it's
so
people
true.
that. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody wants to do well, and there's pressure to do well. And if you get second and third, you might as well have gotten 10th place in Vietnam.
Yeah,
and that attitude towards education, and also the young people in Vietnam, they don't have any baggage, right? They're not they don't have any political issues with the Vietnam War and this and that. They want to move forward. They want to embrace any and everything American, and they know that learning English and being able to communicate effectively gives them that free pass to maybe working for a foreign company, maybe making growing relationships with foreigners in the country. And I remember being in Vietnam and just walking along the parks, and people would come up to me. This is back in 2008. I don't know about now, but people would come up, and if they sense you're not from the country, they'll try to start a conversation. And you don't do that shit in the U.S. You definitely don't do it in Europe. And I've always respected that kind of. I don't give a fuck. I'm just gonna talk to this guy and see if he's American. If he is, I'll maybe make a friend. Maybe he can help me with my English for the 15 seconds that we interact. I love and respect that simpleness and that purity in the attitude of the Vietnamese people.
Yeah, they don't question it. It's just like, this is going to benefit me. I enjoy it. I need it. So I'm just going to go out and do it. I don't care what people think. Yeah. And that still happens. That park in District 1 where a lot of kids just get together. That club still goes on. They still go out there every single day. I have old friends that were part of that group that just basically just walks right up to a tourist and then just speaks English, like, hey, what's your name? And I love it because it leaves people with such a good impression of Vietnam, because that's really what it is. They are not that shy about those things. Yeah, there's this tenacity to it.
Yeah. Tell me what, because I know you mainly through your skits, and Tony Alex. This guy is funny sec. He's got wigs on. He's got different things on, and he relates to every Viet Kieu who's got a back high or a chu nam, and chu nam is Uncle Five, by the way, Alex. But what inspired you to create these different characters?
Oh man, my family, 100%. That's my family. They're all based on real family members. Like I have a character called Mai, which is based off of my uncle. Because he's like I told you earlier, they're such storytellers. My family, just getting around and just like everyone is like laughing until like their stomach like hurts, and I don't know how we never got complaints in the US, because you can hear my family from like 2 blocks away, like outside, and they're not even singing karaoke yet. That comes later. But so they're based off my mom as well. Some of like the auntie characters are just like, I'll just get off a call with my mom and then she'll say something hilarious and I'm just like, I gotta just reenact this. And sometimes I'm just hoping my mom will watch it. I'm just kind of roasting her. We have this very fun kind of joking, I guess, culture in my family. And then the other main thing was just kind of the awkwardness that happens every day here in Vietnam as Vietnamese-American, kind of third culture with one step in Vietnamese culture and one step in American culture. And it just happens so frequently, like these little funny things that happen, like not being able to read fast enough, or like being confused about a word that like I should know, but I don't know, it's just all these things I stumble on here. And I think that I did it completely organically. I didn't have an intention to be an influencer or creator or anything like that. I'm just having a good time.
Hold on, that wasn't part of the master plan. This you kind of
No.
Fell into this? Oh, interesting.
No, interestingly, me and my wife set off to do this like kind of amazing world travel adventure. During COVID, we decided to quit our jobs and travel the world for a year. And we had this plan to do all these different countries. And I wanted to create like a travel couples, kind of like YouTube channel that I see a lot of people doing. I'm like, babe, we can pay for this whole trip if we get popular, get some, get a following. It never took off. Even our families were like, yeah, these are okay, guys. And then once I landed in Vietnam, I just made one reel to just be like, hey, we're here in Vietnam. We're loving it. This is why we're here, kind of just for friends and family. And then that blew up. And then all these people were commenting. And I was like, it was such a weird transition because I remember the next day posting something that was like a really inside joke thing, because like most of my followers were just my friends and family, and then people were like kind of getting triggered. I don't remember exactly what it was, but people were getting angry and like, commenting. And I was like, who are you? Like, what are you doing on my page? And I was like, oh my God, there's like strangers following me now. I have to like kind of, be careful what I say on here. And then I started just doing goofy reels, just, like I said, just to story tell. But what really encouraged me and motivated me a lot was when I did reels that were not really funny, kind of just speaking to the experience of being Vietnamese-American or being Vietnamese. And so many people comment, people like share their experiences, their stories. They're like, oh my God, I really relate to this. People message me in the direct messages and say like, hey, I really appreciate blah, blah. People are telling me that, they're sitting down with their moms and talking about these topics that I remind them of. And I'm just like blown away. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing, and that really pushed me to keep doing that and create content that is really honest. That's just me, authentically me, but then resonate with people so that we can have talks and discussions and share these experiences. So that's really like the majority of the reason why I keep doing this. But also just having fun. I'm just goofing off most of the time.
Yeah. You look like you're having fun, and I think to be able to poke humor at these very familiar family relationships that VQs have with their families in America as well as in Vietnam. And you say the part you story tell very well, by the way, but you're able to communicate what a lot of VQs already experienced, and I think nobody has taken the time to do it properly. So that's why it kind of resonates with myself in particular, because a lot of the stuff you say, damn, I mean, I know his name is Chris Tran. Is he related to me somehow? Is he? We have the same family members there, because I was connecting with a couple of buddies just the other day, and who also follow you. Yeah, man, his shit is pretty cool. You said that there are some people that don't like or comment negatively. What are the haters saying? I don't get what's the hate here.
Oh, I mean, I can't say that it's even close to being like a majority of the comments ever. It's just like every now and then. But I think it's because I share my experience on there. And when I'm sharing my experience, I guess if I don't have that disclaimer very clearly for people, which I don't feel like I need to, people immediately get triggered. Like, hey, that's not how it goes. That's not what happens. That's not true. Like, I'm just like, okay, that's fine. There's a lot of experiences out there. I'm just telling my story, so that's one. Another thing that happens sometimes, and I don't have like clear evidence of this, but I think maybe there is a reaction from locals sometimes, local Vietnamese people. They hear an English voice, they see a Vietnamese face, and they immediately assume that, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He has no experience here in Vietnam. His Vietnamese understanding is like baby level, and they immediately, I don't know, just try to go in there and like, basically reject or tell me I'm wrong, whatever that is, even though this is an experience that, I share even with Vietnamese locals, like it could be something about the food or the culture or whatever it is. And we're just having a good time. We're laughing, and so for some people that's like, no, like I don't like this, and then they'll send something negative. Which is this really common throughout all social media, I think.
Sure.
That's usually what happens. People see something that makes them uncomfortable, they get triggered, and then they have to leave a comment saying something to tear this down, you know? And it's not the majority. At the beginning, I kind of got confused and maybe even a little affected by it, but now it's just kind of like I'll laugh it off. Or because I'm a teacher, you know, I spent 13 years as a high school teacher, and you know, we had this concept called a teachable moment. You know, when something happens in the classroom, a kid is acting up, you know, we don't ignore it, we have to speak to it. And so sometimes I will get in the comments. I try to keep cool, you know, it doesn't always work, but the vast majority of the time I'll try to be calm and I'll try to engage this person to really see, like, you know, what their logic is, what this is all about, and then kind of like bring it back to the big picture and just show them like, hey, you know, like, this is why I'm speaking to this, and then I get you, and then just show people that we could come to an agreement here and everything's fine, you know? So yeah, there's just that too.
Awesome,
You know,
man. Do you go ahead, Alex?
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that. I mean, I like what you said in the beginning. That you said, you know, you said something about explaining to people, and then you said you don't believe you actually have to. I mean, I think that's a great state of mind to be in, because this is I mean, I don't know all of your content, right? And I definitely don't understand it because I have no way of relating. But I mean, in any situation where somebody is giving a parody or is kind of, you know, joking around with something that's cultural, you're always going to have this reaction from different cultures that some people, you know, they're just going to laugh at it, right? Because they are, you know, they're open enough and have enough self-irony to do that. And other people are going to be offended, right? And I think especially some cultures where respect and honor means a lot, you might have this situation where people, you know, are quicker to become offended. Because I mean, in Denmark, if you do a parody on the Danish culture, right, I think most people, if they get offended, other people will tell them, grow the hell up, right? I mean,
right,
what
yeah.
I mean,
I can see that, yeah.
But still, you're gonna experience it here. And in Denmark, we have an expression called that people they wear small shoes, like they walk around in small shoes, right? That they're easily offended, they're too sensitive or whatever. So it's very different from country to country, and it's so strange that you know, and it's with Vietnam versus Denmark, even with Denmark versus the US, which are still kind of similar countries, right? At least culturally speaking, very similar, but still big differences with regards to how much you can joke around with American culture, the American flag, American nationalism, whether you know, versus in Denmark where there's no such thing, right? So it's strange, but I 100% follow you. But I also follow you when you say that you don't need to explain anything, right? It's a joke.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because my mom loves it, and my dad is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? You know, I don't understand it. He's always complaining to my sister. He's like, why doesn't he get a real job, or, you know, do something better with his time? Like, he's making all this goofy stuff, you know? But that's been my dad. You know, he's actually from my dad's from northern Vietnamese culture, which is I guess in general more strict and kind of like about reputation and image, you know. My mom's like a southerner, just like completely open, you know. She loves it, and she's shown my grandma, you know, where my dad is just like, what the heck is this?
You know, my mom years ago said that, you know, it's people that can make other people laugh, it takes a very special intelligence, because it's very difficult. And but if you have the ability, or if you develop the ability, you can open a lot of doors, because everybody enjoys a good laugh. And to communicate sensitive topics, cultural topics, for example, in a way that I think the only way actually to communicate these kind of sensitive topics is through humor. And
I agree with that.
Have a serious conversation about it. But if you can do it in a way that you can, because through laughter you kind of open up, people will kind of put their guards down. So I think what you're doing is very clever. I said earlier, you're a great storyteller. Have you always been a great storyteller, or that's something you have built in recent times through the work that you do on social media?
It's something that I've only seen myself do recently. Like, and by that I mean, you know, making content was something I did like a year and a half ago, where I'm actually in front of a camera and it's my face. You know, before that I was like trying to do travel content with my wife, but then me sitting there and watching my face and you know, I did it. It was so new to me that I'm like, oh my God, my teeth look like that. You know, like, you know, it's something I didn't really notice. And so recently that I started doing that, was like a year and a half ago, when I was just trying to make reels to teach English, because I wanted to come back to Vietnam, ultimately do the same thing I've been doing, teach and then be an English teacher, which was the original job I had here in Vietnam for 4 years. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll like get online and create a brand for myself. I was making TikTok videos, and they were terrible in the beginning. And then I had one that was just really goofy. It was like a goofy thing that I was like always telling my friends for a really long time, about like intonation in English and Vietnamese, because the Vietnamese is tonal. So in English, you can say stuff like, is that your car? Or is that your car? Is that your car? You know, like you could do that in English. The meaning changes when you inflect on certain words in English, but you can't do that in Vietnamese at all, right? Because it's like you have to follow this very strict tonal pattern to like say what you want to say. And I just did kind of a goofy reel for that, and it went viral. That was like my 7th or 8th reel that I ever made on TikTok. And then I realized, I was like, oh, whoa, if I just like, you know, raise my eyebrow a certain kind of way and do this with my voice and like get the pacing right, oh wow, I could actually make like really fun, entertaining content, you know, like. And then I started getting more successful with a few of them, and then kind of getting a little formula going. And that's when I realized I could do that. But I guess, I don't know, maybe if I was really gonna analyze where this came from, I spent many years in the classroom as a teacher, teaching history, which is like, to a lot of people, the most boring subject you can teach.
Alex will talk day and night with you about history. He's a history
amazing. Yeah, so I taught world history, I taught U.S. history, American politics, and my kids were tough. You know, they were like really tough LA kids, pretty rough neighborhood. A lot of them just didn't want to be there, and I wanted to make it fun. You know, so I tried my best to make it really interesting for them, and my presence and the way I delivered it mattered a lot, you know. So then that might have conditioned me to become a content creator, which is so crazy to me, because, you know, I taught economics too for a semester. We did personal finance, and you know, I had a lot of kids that were like, oh, mister, I don't want to go to college. I want to be a content creator. And I was like, are you sure about that? You should go to college, man. You know. And then they're watching me become a content creator right now. A lot of them are my original followers, you know. Like, they were all my students, because I taught 12th grade. And when I was a teacher teaching them, I couldn't add them on social media. But once they graduated, I was like, yeah, follow me on my Instagram. Like 2/3 of my original followers were all my high school students, and they're watching me and they're rooting for me. They're like, yo, Mr. Tran. I was like, yeah, I'm doing the thing. Yeah, so it's pretty wild. But a lot of my I think just comfort doing that might have come from teaching as well.
Yeah, sounds like it. How was I mean, obviously social media has been a part of your business now. Do you see that content creation will be something you're going to be doing for the indefinite future? Because you're great at it. So
that's a really good question. Yeah, you're making me reflect now on it. Yeah, I think so. And only because I thought about this recently, actually, because my parents, you know, even my mom, who's pretty open as a Vietnamese person to, you know, whatever I do, there's a little bit of like Vietnamese culture, I think, that's kind of like, you don't want to show yourself too much to the public, you know. It's just like it's very private, you know, like, you know, don't go share personal stories and all this stuff. Like, it's uncomfortable for the family. My mom's kind of like, do you want to share that, you know? But I love that. That's something I've always done when I was a kid. You know, I just share stuff, and I write things, and I love writing. And I think that's like a part of who I am. And so when I talk about like a future on social media, I might not continue doing like uncle characters and auntie characters and like comedy type stuff, but I do want to get more serious, you know, get into vlogging and just sharing my opinion, because I have a lot to say, I think, about Vietnamese culture, where we're at right now. And I feel like I have a pretty unique experience because of my connection with Vietnam, even being a Vietnamese born in the States. My connection with Vietnam, I think, is pretty unique, and my fluency in the language. So I feel like there's a lot I want to speak to with the purpose of just bridging, you know, because I'm so committed here in Vietnam, and I have so many friends here, and I have so many beautiful experiences here that I feel like a lot of Vietnamese overseas, they might be curious about, but they're not seeing it, they're not hearing it. So I want to kind of just tell those stories. So that's the kind of content I'll probably keep making until whatever comes next.
What has been, well, not what, but who has been somebody that has inspired you to do what you do right now? Are there, you have different inspirations or different people that you draw a lot of motivation or influence from?
I do actually. I have a couple creators that I really love. One called Richado TV. He's a African English. He's a black dude from England, and he lives in Japan. And he's amazing. He's so freaking funny. I lived in Japan too with my wife for about 4 months, and she loves Japan. And you know, we had to do this thing on our world travel, just like spend a long time in Japan. And that's when I discovered him. And you know, he's kind of doing something similar. He's like an outsider living in this culture, and then just kind of talking on his experience. You know, he does skits and stuff like that. You know, so I really drew a lot of inspiration from him. There's another guy, I forget his full name now, but it's like Liam. Liam is like one of his names. He's an English guy also in Germany, and he does a lot of German commentary. Yeah, that Liam, Liam or Liem or something like that. And his stuff is hilarious. Man, I freaking love his stuff. But there's a brand, or I don't know if it's a brand or a type of content out there that's like, you know, somebody from the outside coming in and like just commenting on the culture and the experience from a place of love and fascination, but like just laughing at what's going on here, you know? And I like that kind of content. And now that you mentioned like kind of the art of doing that and getting people to laugh on these like very sensitive cultural topics, it is kind of an art, and it makes me reflect on like, you know, how humorous Vietnamese people are about this. Actually, it's making me wonder about that, because sometimes I don't know, you know, a lot of my followers are Vietnamese-American, they get it, you know, but I'm like, do Vietnamese people laugh at this, you know? Like, but
Vietnamese people are hilarious, man.
I follow that. Follow that.
They're very. This is something that Alex can't. Well, maybe he can relate to it, or maybe not. But he doesn't. You know, Vietnamese people have this very straightforward way of talking. You know, I remember when my sister was younger, and she was, you know, at the age where she was just eating a bunch of junk food and getting kind of thick. My mom would always say, you know, "Mop you con hell," you know, or you know, you're fat like a freaking pig. And it's not like to hurt her. It's just kind of, you know, it's an observation. And you know, in a country like Denmark, where you're very choosy, picky about the words you use, and I mean, more so in woke America now, right? But you know, you can't get away with that kind of shit in America. But in Vietnam, still, and for the indefinite future, you know, if a mom sees something that she's unsatisfied with, she's gonna say it in the most plain, simple, no sugarcoating. And it took, you know, it took a lot of my it took my wife actually kind of time to get used to this frankness in the way we communicate. Not meant to harm, not meant to piss you off. It just meant kind of, I observed this about you. It's kind of, because you know, it's not like the person doesn't know about themselves, but they feel it's their obligation. They're you know, they're doing a good thing by letting you know that you're a slob or whatever. But I like that though. I kind of like that because I grew up around that. You know, my dad used to not say that I was fat, because I've never been fat, but he used to call me. He would say, what would he say to me? Ngu như con bò, or something like dumb.
Ngu như bò.
That's right, exactly, right.
Yeah, dumb like a cow.
But that's cool. I respect that. I actually prefer. I wish that America went kind of in that direction, where they can just kind of, you know, call it as you see it, man. You know what I mean? You're doing everybody a favor. Just speak the quiet part out loud in a way. Right?
It frees everyone up, and like, it's just like, we're just laughing at the end of the day. The intention, we understand. It's so clear. That's so funny you brought that, because my recent reel that I did was just like on the nursery rhyme, like ăn cướp gà, you know, like that's like told to little kids, the babies. It's like, you know, it's like a little nursery rhyme, but there's like chicken shit in it, and like, you know, like eating poop, you know. And then my wife, she's Vietnamese heritage too, and she's never heard that before. And I was like, what? You never heard this? Like, every Vietnamese kid hears this from their mom. And then she's like, so like grossed out by it. They're like, she's like, why would you say this? And I'm like, what? You really feel like offended by that? Like, you know, like I couldn't understand like her shock. You know, I was like, it's so cute though in the Vietnamese context. Like, you got to understand it in the context. And And the what I really liked about just that particular reel too, because I was watching the comments and it unites all Vietnamese people. Like Vietnamese people here in Vietnam, but all over the world. Like there was a whole generation of us that all our moms told us that nursery rhyme, except for my wife apparently, with the chicken poop. You know, and that's my favorite. You know, stuff that like folks here and overseas can all connect on. I was like, yeah, this one's a win.
What's
so I love it.
Go ahead, Alex.
Go ahead on. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, Nate. I mean, I wonder if there's a balance. I mean, you mentioned the fat shaming thing, right? You know, in Denmark, in the US, etc. If you say something like that, obviously you're gonna be fired from your job. You're gonna be socially excluded. People are gonna call you some pretty nasty stuff if you walk around telling people that they're fat, right? And I think to some extent, I mean, but I'm also raised in a culture that thinks like that. I think in general we are way too sensitive in the West now, right? So it would be nice with some more straightforwardness, but also some more thick skin just in general. But I mean, you mentioned the thing with the nursery rhyme. I think we've had a process here in Scandinavia, you know, kind of a quasi-Nazi process with book burning, right? That you've had these old nursery rhymes, school books, children's books that contain something that is now politically incorrect or inappropriate, like whatever, black slaves or something like that, right? So we have nursery rhymes where there's a slave that's black, and then you know suddenly this generation doesn't like that, so now nobody can read that book to their children anymore. And I also think it's just a matter of you know generation, and you mentioned context yourself, right? You know, it's a matter of, was it a different time when a certain book was written, or was it so my question I think to you would be, do you think this is a matter of time? Do you think it's just a matter of time in Vietnam before people start acting out against stuff like this? Or do you think there's sort of a stronger, more resilient spirit to the Vietnamese culture that allows for stuff like that to exist forever? Or what do you think?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I started sensing some kind of I guess not censorship, but more like the treating these things very delicately kind of movement happening in Vietnam as well. I see a lot of young Vietnamese people incorporating ideas from the West and being like, oh, maybe we shouldn't fat shame, or like, you know, let's use like more polite words for these things. You know, that's happening here. That's happening here right now too. So it does make me wonder if we're kind of in an intersection right now where like with our generation, like we are, I guess, mature enough to accept and laugh at what our parents say and do. But at the same time, we're kind of like, oh, maybe we should balance this, you know, like let's not, like some things we keep and some things we don't, you know, kind of like seeing our parents speaking like this as a thing that's happening in a certain time and a certain context. And we might be that filter where we're like, I don't think I'm going to use this with my kid, or even if I do, it won't be the same. You know, it's a little filtered down a little bit. But I wouldn't say there's anything that's happening that's like, it doesn't look like massive censorship of books or anything like that here. Along the lines of what's happening in Denmark and maybe in the US too. But there is language that's changing. And I did this on a couple of my reels where there are politically correct terms now for groups of people here in Vietnam. Stuff that I didn't know about because my parents are not politically correct.
Yeah,
you know,
not at
just
all.
using these certain names for like groups and like, you know, and I'm like, Mom, you can't say that anymore. You know, that's actually offensive to people now. And she's like, what? Like, we always use this word, you know? And now I'm just learning that Vietnam does have like a pretty strong movement towards like politically correct labels for people, at least, you know? So there's a bit of all of that kind of happening in Vietnam as well. So maybe, I don't know, maybe on the ground, people are like, whatever, not really using it, but up top somewhere, you know, like there is kind of a movement in this direction.
I'm not going to offer my opinion on the matter. I come from a generation where people had just had tough skin, and the little things that piss the shit out of people now, we never batted an eye. I batted an eye on it. That makes it like whatever.
I think things like like that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I mean, I teach my kids that too. That they need to be. I have young kids, 4 and 6, and I absolutely refuse to let them grow up to be, weak flowers, or not flowers, but the people who are brittle, snowflakes, right? That are constantly enraged and pissed off and kind of go out to the world with an attitude of kind of almost looking around for signs that somebody's trying to offend them.
Yeah.
Not to get too political, but it's just my belief.
No. Yeah, I totally get it. I had a funny moment with that recently where some of my Vietnamese students here that I used to teach English to, they were sharing their Halloween costumes. And then one of them was a group of girls that were dressed up as Mexicans. Like they were wearing like the Mexican clothes, and they were making like some like funny, like, I don't know, like I'm like, this sounds Arabic, dude. Like that's not even Mexican, And they're making reels with it. And I was like cracking up. I'm like, oh my God, I have so many Mexican friends back home. I had to share this with them. I was like, hey, these are my students. Like, you guys offended by this, And they just laugh, They're just like, no, we're not, like it's not offensive. This is like, their intention is pretty innocent, and like, they said they're just offended because the student said Happy Halloween, and they're just like, man, that's not Halloween. That's Dia de los Muertos. That's the wrong holiday. That's why we dress like that. It's not Halloween in there. But they weren't offended by people like dressing up. Oh yeah, and also here you have this movement of Chicano culture here. I don't know.
I saw that, man. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
They,
oh my God.
They're all decked out. They get the neck tats.
Oh my God, full on. Yeah, they're like preserving like Chicano, like kind of like gangster culture here. Exact replicas of everything, right? The hairstyles, the tattoos, the music. You go, I haven't been there, but they run a whole chain of barbershops here. Mexican flags flying, And I pop into the comments sometimes just to see like, how people reacting to this. And I say like mostly the Latino comments are like very supportive. They're like, hey, these guys really appreciate the culture. Like let's not like I don't know. Let's treat it as what it is. This is appreciation. These guys have deep respect,
100%. 100%. That's how I would view something like that. Yeah.
Don't look to be offended,
Yeah, man. It's just a form of self-expression. The older I get, the more I feel a connection to the idea of just freely expressing yourself, not giving a shit about what other people think about you, always worrying about how you're going to offend somebody, always worried about how people are going to size you up. Just be you. And I think when I was younger, maybe I was more kind of sensitive to what people how they would view me from the outside. But the older I get, I'm just thinking, man, we have a short time on this planet, on this earth, and if you like somebody like this whole Chicano movement, right? Hey man, they just appreciate your culture. They want to pay homage to it, respect to it. Let them do their thing. It's not meant to disrespect you or insult you. And there's a very famous clip that went viral where this guy was walking around and interviewing people in the streets and say, hey, if I'm dressed a certain way, is it a bad thing? Are you offended? Oh yeah, this is cultural appropriation, right? And then you go to a country like Asia, and the white guy wearing the ouya walking around, the fucking Vietnamese love it, right? They try to get, can I take a picture of you, sir? And so it's just completely,
it's respect, right? It's respect.
Yeah. It shows interest in their culture. The Vietnamese people love that.
Yeah, but it's also, if you think about it, except for bullying in lower school grade years, whatever you call it in English, right? Except for bullying, if you think about who we make fun of the most during our lifetime, it's usually our friends, right? It's usually people that we respect. So most jokes are friendly in one way or another, right? And then we have different sort of ideas of how to interpret this. But I've had this experience myself, not to make everything about race all the time, but I've had this experience that a couple of my friends who are black, right? If you're sitting in a room and you make a joke, I make a lot of jokes myself about, let's say, accent or something like that, right? The people in the room who get offended are not the people that I joke about. It's usually some white privileged person then that suddenly gets offended on behalf of somebody else, and then we end up in this discussion where somebody's actually somebody wants somebody else to be offended, right? And this is this strange thing that's going on in a lot of places in the world today, that the people that you're joking with, they're laughing and we're all friends, and then there's somebody some privileged, spoiled kid somewhere else that wants everybody else to be offended by something, or wants to make a fuss about something that everybody else is laughing about. And I think, luckily, there are places in the world where this is not happening yet. But I really hope for Vietnam that you can sort of attain a little bit of that thick skin, because we're definitely losing it over here.
Oh no, I got it much more than before. Yeah, because people see my face a lot now and like have things to say about me, and I'm just like, okay, at this point, I can't let it get to me because I'm just gonna keep doing my thing.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. But no, just go ahead.
Just a quick question. I'm a big believer in this concept of stacking skills. My social media handle for Instagram, for Facebook, and for Twitter is stacking skills, where you build upon one skill and then you kind of move. I mean, how do I say this? The idea of learning something and then building upon that and building upon that. Looking back at your experience so far to where you got now, do you see the stacking skills taking place?
Yeah, I do. I think about that sometimes. I was on, well, this might not be skills specifically, but just maybe knowledge. So I talked about this with Kenneth. He does a podcast called The Vietnamese, and he kind of saw in my reels, like, there's this humor, there's this guy like dressed up as an uncle talking about some kind of Vietnamese stuff, and he's like, wait, this guy's not just being funny here and just goofing off. Like, he has like understanding and knowledge of all this cultural nuance that's in there that like a lot of people wouldn't be able to do, and like certain people catch that, and then like that wasn't something that I could just like right off my chest do. It came from like years and years of like experiencing a lot of these things firsthand to be able to do that. And I was like, okay, I never thought about that, but yeah, there is like a kind of like refinement even that you can't really get without the time and the hours put in. Like, you need to actually be exposed to that and be participating in that for a long time to really have that nuance, to really speak to that and do it properly. So that's just knowledge. And in terms of skills, I would say, I talked about my teaching experience a lot. And right now I'm trying to start a couple businesses. So I have my language learning that I'm trying to do, because I'm such a big believer in language being the big link for all of us. So I have the English brand, and the English brand is for Vietnamese people. I'm mostly in the Vietnamese market, speaking to Vietnamese people about learning English. Huge market here. Feels saturated, but it's not. Like, every Vietnamese person here is still looking for the best way to learn English. They like a certain kind of teacher, like certain kind of program. There's a lot of room here for that still. And then Vietnamese, and Vietnamese, like specifically for heritage learners, Vietnamese folks overseas who are at this crossroads right now where, they're our generation having kids, and they're like, hey, my Vietnamese is not amazing. I can't really pass it on to my kids right now. So there's like this big need for that as well. And I don't know if like that needs being met completely. There's a lot of content out there for kids learning Vietnamese, but it's not always exactly what people want. And I'm not trying to even do market analysis here. I'm just like, you know what? I'm just me. I'm a Vietnamese-American, has the language. And, from my perspective, this is how I would teach Vietnamese. And this is how I would get kids to like Vietnamese, and then I'm just going to do that. So we're trying to work on like our YouTube presence right now. The idea is kind of like a Vietnamese Sesame Street, but we don't have the resources to achieve that right now.
Yeah.
So that's my vision for the future. We're starting small. We're taking baby steps. And then the big thing too is tours. So I'm actually leading my first local tour here in Saigon on Saturday.
Smart, man.
First group, and me and my business partner right now, we're talking about expanding out, next year to do, what we are kind of calling heritage tours. So folks coming back, looking for, a way to connect to their roots. And
that's brilliant, man.
Their family stories, things like that. Because I shared with you guys like that incredible experience I had, traveling with my professor for that semester. And that was so impactful for me that I want to somehow keep that going. The program doesn't exist anymore. And if I could even do a semblance of that program for people, that would be amazing. So we're trying to develop that as well. And that's also stacking on top of skills that over the years I've accumulated, but a lot of that just being my experience. It's my unique experience and my unique story and commitment and connection to Vietnam, and then carrying that over to all these businesses, these products, these ideas.
I saw that you have a course called Survival Vietnamese or something. Is that for expats, or who's that targeting?
Survival Vietnamese is for everybody course. Yeah. So the idea was, the main thing about that is the teaching method, because I really like these programs that are kind of old school, like learning language through just audio tapes. And you're just kind of listening to somebody and then you just repeat, like I learned Spanish that way. There's a voice that's like, hello in Spanish is hola, and you're just like repeating. And I spent so much time in LA traffic when I was living back home that I was like, dude, I need to make use of this time. And 2 years sitting in LA traffic, listening to these tapes, I learned Spanish and I used it. And I went to all these Spanish speaking countries and I was like, oh my God, this works. This actually works. So I wanted to do that for Vietnamese. And, there's a few out there on the market, but I'm like, I think I could do it better. And like, it's more engaging, and then we'll have a video with it. And so that was the whole idea behind it. And then we wanted a theme, because teaching language, you don't want to just throw words at people. Like you want to give them some kind of theme, some kind of story. And our whole theme was visiting Vietnam. So the whole course is like, you land at the airport. What's next? You're going to get a taxi, and then you're going to look for your hotel, and then you're going to talk to your receptionist, and it just builds on that. And then, we have these like little mini conversations that happen all throughout the course that you listen to. And then it then breaks down that conversation. And then we're extracting all these little bits of grammar out of that, so that you by the end of it, you're able to confidently go and do these functions when you get to Vietnam. Like you can ask the hotel person, the receptionist, like, why is the water off in my room or something like that? That's the whole intention behind it, and yeah, that's survival Vietnamese. It's like surviving your trip to Vietnam. But that has sparked a lot of other ideas and projects for us in the future as well.
Awesome, man. I think that's brilliant, man. The whole idea of you arrive to Vietnam, and even before you get to your hotel, there's so many little interactions you can make along the way with people. That maybe somebody comes up to you and tries to sell you something, or you have to communicate. You need to buy your little SIM card and so forth. And how do you ask for that properly? And I think the idea of this heritage thing is freaking brilliant. I wish there was something like that when I was in Vietnam, when I first came back. And I know there's a lot of Vietnamese people who are trying to reconnect with their roots, and they would absolutely be excited if there was an opportunity to find and to connect with a program like that, where they can talk to somebody who is like them, in the sense that who has an honest, sincere interest in learning about the culture, not just visiting, but also getting deeper into the thinking of the people, why certain things are. I know that after I came out of Vietnam, I finally began to understand my mom and my dad, why they viewed the world in a certain way, why they said certain things, why certain things were constantly communicated at the dinner table. Didn't get it. Wasn't interested, kind of was bored of hearing it. But when I went back to Vietnam, man, it made sense, man. It was like full circle. So, okay, now I see why this thing was always stressed to me. And now I see why this whole idea of family and getting together. And this is kind of something you might relate to, right? In the US, relationships are very far and hard to build with family members. Everybody's busy, everybody's living their life. But the neat thing about living in Vietnam is we had these nam yaos. And so it forces every freaking year, no matter what, you got to sit down at a table and break bread with people, and you got to figure out, okay, this guy, how is he related to my dad? How is this person related to my mom? And it forces these interactions, and it keeps the family bonds, so to say. I look at my cousins in America. Some of them, I haven't seen them in decades, and there's no interaction. There's not anybody reaching out to make an interaction, and I feel bad for them almost. Because I remember being in Vietnam, one of the most enjoyable aspects of Vietnam were those family relationships, and not just direct first cousins. There'd be a third, fourth, fifth cousin, but because you see them every year, there's a bond, there's a connection, there's recognition when they talk about so and so and so, and this connection also to people of the past, ancestors. I really,
Mhm.
really love that. You know, in the U.S., once you're dead, you're pretty much gone. You know, and nobody ever thinks about you. But in Vietnam, you're forced to remember that great grandfather that who did a certain thing. He moved from the north down to this. I come from central Vietnam originally, from Quang
Mhm.
Binh, and
Mm.
didn't really care, wasn't really interested. But after going back to Vietnam and going to these tambios and hearing these different stories, man, I have a new sense of connection and pride and understanding of the history
Mhm.
of not just my family, but also the Quang Binh as a certain area in Vietnam, their rich history and how it fits into the rest of the Vietnamese experience. And so
Mhm.
I'm saying all this because I'm thinking there are a lot of people that they have no idea what they can experience and grasp if
Yeah.
they're a program like what you want to put together with this heritage tour thing. I think it's
Mhm.
absolutely brilliant idea.
Yeah, thank you. And it means so much to me. And it's like something that yeah, just you telling me about Wangbin. I had a similar experience last year with my dad too. Just growing up in America, just like you said, like we don't really think about ancestors. It's not really an American thing, you know?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Like I don't think European Americans even think about like, you know, what their stories of their ancestors were like back in Europe, things like I never hear my American friends talk about stuff like that. And I never thought I would feel so touched visiting my family and experiencing that. Like I went with my dad to find his hometown because he left the north when
Yeah.
he was just one and grew up in Saigon.
Yeah.
And he was visiting here last year, and then he just asked me, you know, should we go out to find, you know, your grandma's village? It's like his mom, which he had never. He left when he was one, you know, so he has no memory of it. And he was kind of wishy-washy about it, and I was like, no, you have to do this. I'll book the ticket right now. Let's go. You know, I don't want you to back out of this. This is something that you should experience, and I'll go with you. And then we went out there. We had no plans to even and meet any relatives or anything. We just wanted to take some pictures, maybe find the village. And then we bumped into a couple people who then took us to his actual cousin, right? So that's like I guess his mom, which is my grandma's brother, and their family. It's like direct relative. And they immediately some of them recognized him. Like they're like, yeah, we actually came south after the war. You were on your way to America, and I remember meeting you.
Wow.
And they were like calling him uncle, and he was like, what? I don't remember you at all, you know. And it was like, whoa, that's great. That was like decades ago. And then they were telling us about our ancestral grave sites, you know. And my dad's like, is it still there? Like, can you take us? They're like, yeah, it's just like a couple minutes from here, you know. All the ancestors are like in the neighborhood, right? And that's such a wild concept for me, you know, like for all of us who like live overseas, we're not really connected to the land anymore. And then they're just taking us like a couple minutes away, and like there's like my great grandfather's tomb, and I got like super emotional just watching my dad, like, you know, do the incense and everything, and then I did it, and I felt so much emotion. I was like, oh my god, this person's story, you know, connects to mine, and this is like, I see we have the same last name, and this is basically like our clan here, you know, this is our clan's like grave site. Yeah, it blew me away, and I shared this with a couple other friends who also experienced this too, and we all had this like kind of similar, like, I didn't think it would affect me so much, but it's so meaningful, you know. Like I feel like a lot of people either are seeking that or don't know that they're seeking that.
That's
you
right.
know? So
That's right.
yeah.
Where can people find you if they like your story and they want to kind of follow and maybe even get involved with learning some Vietnamese or English? Can you?
Yeah,
by the way,
absolutely.
we'll leave it in the footnotes of the video, but if you can share, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my primary mode of contact would be through my Instagram, chris.tran.travels. That's the intersection of everything. It's very personal, that account, so I keep everybody up to date with everything I'm doing. Our YouTube channel is where we also share everything for specifically teaching Vietnamese. It's called Survival Vietnamese. That's the name of the YouTube channel that is brand new, so we're just getting it off the ground right now. But you know, big plans for it. And for English, I'm on TikTok as teacher.chris.tran. on TikTok. So yeah, just those 3 platforms, very different, all 3 of them, you know. But yeah, those are the main 3 where people can find me for those specific things.
Hey man, it'd be cool if sometime in the near future, maybe we would do some type of a workshop together and introduce the members of our community to you. I'm sure a lot of the job seekers are I'm assuming would be very excited to maybe brush up on some business English. And if you're interested in that idea, I think that would be very liked and welcomed workshop in the near future. We can talk about that offline, but that'd be really cool. I think a lot of people would find you very, very attractive in terms of just giving them again the more practical and the more real life. And I think your way of communicating is fantastic, and I know without a doubt a lot of people are going to find you very desirable. Is that a word I want to use? Podcast desirable, but
I get your intention with that, but yeah, I'm all for it. Yeah, absolutely, would love to be here, and I would love to meet you guys someday because I've been to Denmark twice, to Copenhagen. One of my best buddies lives there in Copenhagen, and I go out of my way to visit him whenever I'm in Europe or I'm passing through. Actually, Denmark was the place where I flew out of to get here. So we did a flight from Denmark, landing in Bangkok for like a couple hours, and then we were on to Vietnam. That was the last destination we were at. So yeah, I love Denmark. I love Copenhagen. So be cool to see you guys there. We'll hit the sauna.
Cool, man. yeah, right.
It'll be amazing. It'll be amazing.
Yeah.
Throw a message next time you're going to Copenhagen for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, man, we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, man. I was looking forward to it. Something completely different than what we normally do on our little tiny VietAssist YouTube channel. But I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make it more casual and just free flow and introduce you to, because I'm a fan, and I wanted to let the other people in the community know of who you are and maybe connect with you in a future workshop. That'd be really cool.
I'm so happy you hit me up, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Alex, anything else to this? Yeah.
I have nothing other than saying, Chris, thank you so much for spending 1.5 hours with us today. Amazing, funny conversation. I'll watch some more of your content and see if I can wrap my head around it. But it's it's so funny how little I understand these things. But it's been amazing talking with you. Thank you so much, and I hope that we'll get a chance to do, have some more interesting conversations in the future, and definitely meet up next time we're going to where you are, or next time you find yourself to be in Copenhagen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, it was a pleasure, guys.
Pleasure's all ours, man. Have a good one.
See you.
Right.
Take care.
See you guys later. Take care, guys.